Hello students, welcome to today's session. In this session, let us learn in detail about child counseling skills, types of listening skills, process and functions of listening skills. Counseling is a two-way process with interaction between humans which requires an advanced set of skills. Perhaps one of the most important skills in counseling is communication, particularly listening. This assertion may seem obvious as counselors and their clients need an avenue in which to express themselves in one way or another for anything productive to occur, but the subject of communication is more nuanced and varied than merely just taking turns in speaking and listening. Listening is a receptive skill that aids in building and strengthening the therapeutic alliance between the counselor and the client. However, a distinction between hearing and listening is paramount to counseling. While hearing is the physical process of sound entering the ears, which happens automatically, listening requires something more, such as attention and focus, both physically and mentally. Also, this requires complete involvement, and hence it is not just a passive process. Counselors' listening ability generally capture and understand messages of a client's communication as they tell stories, and those messages are transmitted both verbally and non-verbally. Careful listening helps counselors to analyze in detail and support them both physically and psychologically. This assurance by counselors will help client to share their world with him or her confidently. Learning objectives. At the end of this module, we will be able to understand the importance of listening skills, types of listening skills in counseling, process and functions of listening skills in counseling. Listening in a counseling session makes the client feel ethical, appreciated, and admired. When we give all our attention to the client, he or she responds positively by communicating on a deeper level, perhaps by providing more information or by becoming more relaxed. When a counselor pays particular attention to what the client is saying, they are encouraging the client to continue talking as well as ensuring that communication remains open, positive, and participative. Carl Rogers and Richard Farson coined the term active listening in 1957 in a paper of the same title. They wrote, "Active listening is an important way to bring about changes in people." Despite the popular notion that listening is a passive approach, clinical and research evidence clearly shows that sensitive listening is a most effective agent for individual personality change and group development. Listening brings about changes in people's attitude towards themselves and others. It also brings about changes in their basic values and personality philosophy. People who have been listened to in this new and special way become more emotionally mature, more open to their experiences, less defensive, more democratic, and less authoritarian. When a counselor becomes a good listener, getting a clear-cut image of different situations of the client becomes easier. This means asking questions to find out about needs and issues of the client is facilitated better. Listening enables the counselor to provide affirmation, recognizing and exploring the problem. Effective listening is also important in order to have a smooth transition between a variety of topics that the counselor may encounter in a counseling session. There are three main types of listening skills that a counselor should be endowed with. They are active listening, empathetic listening, and critical listening. The term active listening has been used to describe the strategies used by clinicians and counselors to facilitate communications with clients. Active listening involves listening to both verbal and non-verbal messages. Listening to and understanding the client's verbal messages, generally client tells you their story, which is usually a mixture of experiences, behaviors, and affections. By actively listening to clients' problems, counselors are reassuring their client that they understand their situation. This assurance of counselors make the client to feel connected. Counselor skills will be tested when they are having conversation with children as they tell stories which may or may not be relevant. Listening to and interpreting the client's nonverbal messages. When dealing with children, counselors are supposed to give importance to read nonverbal messages such as bodily behavior, facial expression, voice, observe their psychological responses, general appearance, and physical appearance. The onus will be on counselors to extract messages without distorting or over interpreting them. This approach is very important while counseling children, as capturing information verbally may be difficult initially. Listening is more than just hearing what the client is saying. Listening must be empathetic. The empathetic listener is affected by the sorrow or suffering of the person being interviewed. It is characterized by placing oneself in the client's shoes and differs slightly from sympathy. The sympathetic listener says, I know how you feel, but I don't feel the same way. Whereas empathetic listener says, I know how you feel and I feel the same way. Empathy enables the listener to understand emotionally the experiences of his or her clients. It is important, however, that empathetic listening not be carried too far. The therapist must be able to step out of the client's shoes. Empathy is an essential characteristic of counseling, but it is not a universal human capacity. Although empathy can probably not be created, it can be focused and deepened through training, observation, and self reflection. An empathetic counselor may anticipate what is felt before it is spoken and can often help clients articulate what they are feeling. Nonverbal cues such as body posture and facial expression are noted. Clients' reaction to the counselor can be understood and clarified. Clients sometimes say, how can you understand me if you haven't gone through what I'm going through? Counseling, however, is predicated on the belief that it is not necessary to have other people's literal experiences to understand them. The shared experiences of being human is often sufficient. Whether in the initial session or in an ongoing session, clients draw comfort from knowing that counselors are not mystified by their problems. When the main aim of listening is to judge, inspect, or evaluate, then it is termed as critical listening, which is a lot more vital than active listening, since most of the times this requires some plans to be put down gently or decisions to be made carefully. Critical listening is not certainly aimed at finding faults or defects, but also to keenly absorb, understand, predict, and interpret the motto of the speaker and weigh the knowledge or information or news or opinion is being imparted. When listeners have to evaluate a message and respond with their opinion, this is called critical listening. You need to examine carefully what is being said and play an active role because it usually requires you to make a decision, form an opinion, or solve a problem. Making a judgment requires you to access the situation and requires you both listen to what's being said while inspecting at the same time. While practicing critical listening, you need to ask yourself, what is the speaker actually trying to say? How do I feel about their opinion? What is the main argument that is being presented? Does what I am hearing align or differ to my beliefs and opinion? All the decisions we make on a daily basis have a critical listening. It's important that you have an open mind and not let bias or stereotype influence your judgment, and by doing so, you will become a much better listener. Focus on these three features are described as to perfect your critical listening skills. Is the speaker a credible source who is both an expert on the subject being discussed and that I can assure to be giving honest and unbiased details? Reflect on what's being said and decide for yourself if it's true. Consider the source of details, the data used, and if it is really the right conclusion that has been moved in a specified direction. Think about the speaker's interaction and make sure if you're not following an emotional response. Hearing critical listening skills are based on logic. Being a good counselor involves much more than simply knowing what question to ask, and it is imperative to be an effective listener as skill in questioning involves timing, wording, and types of questions. Cormier and Cormier describe four basic listening processes or responses that are crucial for counselors, whether the client is an adult or a child. Clarification refers to questioning that helps the counselor understand an ambiguous message. Typical clarifying responses start with the phrase such as, "Are you saying that? Could you describe me? Say what you mean by," and end with repetition of the client's own words. In addition to clarifying the message, clarification responses confirm the accuracy of the counselor's perception and highest of the client's exactly what he or she has communicated. Hence, the functions of clarification are to encourage client elaboration, to check out the accuracy of what you heard the client say, and to clear up a vague message. Paraphrasing involves taking what the client has said, rephrasing it, and saying it back. The counselor tells the client in the counselor's own words what he or she understood the client to say. Paraphrasing communicates to the client that he or she has been understood. In addition, it also provides the client with an opportunity to clarify the message if the counselor has misunderstood. Another purpose of clarification is to encourage the client to say more about an important topic. Finally, paraphrasing can be used as a strategy to gently redirect the client back to the topic at hand. Consider the following interaction. Client: school has always been really difficult for me. I really have to work hard to do well. My grades have always been good, but it hasn't been easy. Not like my sister, who has always just found it easy right through school. Counselor: so, while you have done well in school, you have had to work very hard. What about that? The main functions of paraphrasing are: number one, to respond to the content, two, to help the client focus on the content or his or her message, and lastly, to highlight the content when attention to feeling is premature or self defeating. Reflection is similar to paraphrasing, but rather than counselor rephrasing the content or what the client has said, reflecting involves describing an emotional component of the client's message. Cormier and Cormier provide the following example to illustrate the distinction between paraphrasing and reflection. Client: everything is humdrum. There is nothing new going on, nothing exciting. All my friends are away. I wish I had the money to do something different. Counselor: paraphrase: with your friends gone and no money around, there is nothing for you to do right now. Counselor: reflection: you feel bored with the way things are for right now? The main functions of reflection are: number one, to respond to the feelings of the client; two, to encourage the client to express more of his or her feelings; number three, to have the client experience feelings more intensely; four, to help the client become more aware of the feelings that dominate him or her; and lastly, to facilitate the client to discriminate his or her feelings accurately. Summarizing is an extension of paraphrasing and reflecting. It involves tying together two or more distinct parts of what the client has said. Summarizing is sometimes used to identify and check out a common theme that reappears across different contexts. Summarizing, like paraphrasing and reflection, provide the client with an opportunity to clarify what he or she has communicated. Listening as a skill in counseling is unfortunately not too easy to acquire. According to Egan, counselors should be aware of some of the following hindrances to effective listening. It is easy to be distracted from what other people are saying if one follows oneself to get lost in one's own thoughts, or if one begins to think what one intends to say in reply. Counselors are also often distracted because they have problems of their own, feel ill, or because they become distracted by social and cultural differences between themselves and the clients. All these factors make it difficult to listen to and understand the clients. Most people listen evaluatively to others. This means that they are judging and labeling what the other person is saying as either right or wrong, good or bad, acceptable or unacceptable, relevant or irrelevant, etc. They then tend to respond evaluatively as well. We tend to listen to ourselves, other people, and the world around us through biased filters. Filtered listening disorders our understanding of our clients. Diagnostic labels can prevent you from really listening to your client. If you see a client as that woman with AIDS, your ability is to listen empathetically to her problems will be severely distorted and diminished. Asking only informational or factual questions won't solve the client problems. Listen to the client's whole context and focus on themes and core messages. If you mentally rehearse your answers, you're also not listening attentively. Counselors who listen carefully to the themes and core messages in a client's story always know how to respond. The response may not be a fluent, eloquent, or practiced one, but it will at least be a sincere and appropriate one. Although sympathy has its place in human transactions, the use of sympathy is limited in helping the relationship because it can distort the counselor's listening to the client's story. To sympathize with someone is to become that person's accomplice. Sympathy conveys pity and even complicity, and pity for client can diminish the extent to which you can help the client. Listening skills play a key role in counseling and guidance, whether involving a child or an adult. It primarily helps to establish a rapport. It is important to distinguish hearing from listening, as listening is an active process. Listening is not just being attentive to the narration, but also to the body language, voice modulation, style of narration, and usage of language. It also requires the counselor to maintain good eye contact, positive gesturing, along with clarification, paraphrasing, reflection, and summarizing in order to make the client feel heard and cared for. Effective listening fosters better feedback for the counselor to the client and vice versa. While actively listening, it is important that a counselor stops any other kind of distraction. This includes the natural dialogue that everyone has running through their mind constantly. Forming judgments regarding what is being said is also a block to actively listening, as is the urge to provide information at what may be or inappropriate pause in the conversation. In case the counselor fails to comprehend what the client tells, it is better to clarify immediately or ask the client to repeat instead of faking to have listened. Counselors must be aware of their listening habits at all times and must continue to check they are supporting the client in the most appropriate manner. Thank you.